The Hotel Hermitage, 9:45 in the evening. The golden hall pulsed with the murmurs of 300 of Europe's most powerful fortunes when a silence cut through the air like a blade. Martim Sanches, a man who had never heard the word no in his 42 years, stood petrified before the woman who had just shattered his ego with that single syllable. Vera Muniz stood there, trembling, yet as imposing as a goddess of vengeance in her black silk gown. The echo of her refusal still reverberated off the marble walls as 300 pairs of eyes turned to witness the moment Europe's most untouchable CEO discovered that there are women who cannot be bought, cannot be seduced, and most certainly cannot be broken. But what Markham did not yet grasp was that this public humiliation had just ignited an obsession that would change both of their lives forever. Earlier that evening, the golden light of baccarat crystal chandeliers danced across the bare shoulders of Europe's most elegant women, casting a spectacle of shadow and brilliance that transformed the main hall into a scene from a modern fairy tale. The perfume of white roses, imported from Ecuador, mingled with the discreet aroma of the world's most expensive wines, while a murmur of conversations in 5 different languages created a symphony of power and sophistication. From his private balcony on the 20th floor, Martim Sanches observed it all, a glass of 50-year-old scotch in his hand, held with the same ease with which he held the reins of his real estate empire. At 42, he was what the society pages called the last of the romantic tycoons. Dark brown hair, shot with silver at the temples that only enhanced his charm, green eyes that seemed to decipher a person's most intimate secrets with a single glance, and a smile that had sealed billion-euro deals and conquered hearts across the continent. But tonight, as he watched the European elite amuse themselves 3 floors below, his eyes searched for only one person: Vera Muniz. She was there, near the appetizer table, conversing with the wife of the French Minister of Finance. Her Italian silk dress clung to every curve of her 38-year-old body like a second skin, and her golden brown hair was swept into a low chignon that exposed the elegant line of her neck. Discreet diamond earrings, a Christmas gift he had given her the previous year, claiming it was for exceptional work, caught the light with every turn of her head. Martin brought the whiskey to his lips and smiled. 3 years. For 3 years, she had been his executive assistant, maintaining a professional distance that bordered on glacial. But he saw it. God, he saw it. He saw the way she held her breath when he stood too close in meetings. He saw how her dark eyes lingered on his lips when he spoke. He saw the subtle blush that colored her cheeks when he praised her work. Vera Muniz was attracted to him. It was as obvious as the sun rising over the Mediterranean. But her dignity, her professionalism, and her fierce determination not to become just another one of her boss's conquests had created a barrier he had not yet managed to breach. Yet. Mr. Sanches? Her voice reached him through the discreet earpiece he wore. The Italian ambassador would like to greet you. Even through the small electronic device, Vera's voice provoked a reaction in him he could not entirely control. A deep, slightly husky tone, with a Brazilian accent she had never completely shed, even after 15 years in Europe. 5 minutes, he replied, adjusting his Armani tuxedo and glancing at the Patek Philippe on his wrist. 9:15. The night was still young. The private elevator delivered him directly to the main hall, where he was immediately surrounded by the usual court of admirers, sycophants, and opportunists who orbited his fortune like planets around the sun. Greetings were exchanged. Business was subtly mentioned. Invitations to yachts and country estates were extended. But Martim's eyes never stopped tracking Vera's elegant figure as she moved through the hall, overseeing every detail of the evening with the efficiency of a maestro conducting an orchestra. She was perfect, absolutely perfect, and he wanted her, not just physically, though the desire he felt for her was a constant flame burning in his veins. He wanted all of her. He wanted to shatter those professional barriers, to see her lose control, to be the man who could make that strong, determined woman finally surrender. Martim, my dear friend. The booming voice of Claude Beaumont, the French wine magnate, cut through his thoughts. A magnificent event. Your assistant has truly outdone herself this time. Indeed, Vera is exceptional, Martim replied, accepting another glass of whiskey from a passing waiter. In everything she does. Ah, yes, the beautiful Brazilian, Claude smirked, in a way that made the muscles in Martim's jaw tighten. Quite a woman. Tell me, is she just an assistant? The insinuation was obvious, and a wave of possessiveness shot through Martim like a lightning bolt. Vera wasn't his. Not yet. But the mere idea of another man, even considering touching her, awakened a primitive instinct he didn't know he possessed. Vera is an exceptional professional, he answered, his voice carrying a warning tone that experienced men like Claude knew to recognize. And a woman who deserves the utmost respect. Claude raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but his smile lingered. Of course, merely admiring her efficiency. He paused. And her beauty, I must admit. Martim finished his whiskey in a single gulp. The alcohol was beginning to burn in his veins, mixing with 3 years of frustration and desire. 3 years of subtle games, of unresolved tension, of sleepless nights imagining what it would be like to have her in his arms, to hear his name fall from those perfect lips in a moment of total surrender. If you'll excuse me, he murmured, setting the empty glass on a nearby table. His steps carried him directly to where Vera stood, near the windows that offered a breathtaking view of the Monte Carlo harbor. She was alone for the moment, checking something on her tablet with the focus he so admired. The night is a success, he said, moving close enough to catch the scent of her discreet perfume. Something floral and sophisticated that suited her perfectly. Vera looked up from the tablet, and for a moment, just a moment, he saw beyond the professional mask. He saw the way her gaze swept quickly down his body before returning to his face. He saw the rapid pulse in her throat. He saw the faint blush she tried to conceal. Thank you, Mr. Sanches. Everything is running according to plan. Mr. Sanches, 3 years. And she still insisted on the formality, even when they were alone. But there was something in the way she said his name, an almost intimate softness that made every cell in his body awaken. Martim, he corrected, as he always did. How many times must I ask you to call me Martim? We are at a work event, she replied, but her voice was slightly huskier now. It's appropriate to maintain formality. Appropriate, he repeated, taking a step closer. The whiskey had warmed his blood, loosening the caution he normally maintained around her. Do you know what isn't appropriate, Vera? She raised an eyebrow, but he noticed how her fingers tightened around the tablet. What? Pretending there's nothing between us. The words were out before he could stop them, heavy with 3 years of repressed frustration and desire. Vera froze, her eyes widening slightly. Mr. Sanchez, she began, but he cut her off. You've worked with me for 3 years. 3 years of being the most important woman in my professional life. 3 years of trying to ignore this. He gestured between them. This connection that exists between us. There is no connection, she said, but her voice trembled. There is a working relationship based on mutual respect and professionalism. Martim smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, one laced with a dangerous intensity. Professionalism. Back to that word. He took another step, now close enough to see the tiny gold flecks in her brown eyes, close enough to count her every eyelash, close enough to hear the change in her breathing. Do you know what I think of your professionalism, Vera? She swallowed hard, but kept her chin high. What? I think it's an excuse. His voice was low, intimate, dangerous. I think it's your way of protecting yourself from what you feel for me. I feel nothing but professional respect, she whispered, but the words lacked conviction, a lie. He raised a hand, his fingers almost grazing her cheek. Your eyes tell me otherwise. Your breathing tells me otherwise. Your body tells me otherwise. Vera took a step back, but her back met the cool glass of the window. Mr. Sanchez, please. Martim, he corrected again, this time with an authority he rarely used with her. Say my name. I will not. Say it. His hand finally made contact, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. Just once. I want to hear my name on your lips. For a heart-stopping moment, Vera seemed to melt under his touch. Her eyes fluttered closed, her breath hitched, and Martim felt a surge of triumph. Finally, she was letting her guard down. Martim, she whispered, and the name was a caress against his ears. That's it, he murmured, leaning closer. You know what I want, Vera. Do you know how long I've waited for this? But then, as if waking from a trance, Vera's eyes snapped open. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by the iron resolve he knew so well. Stop, her voice was firm again. Stop now. Why? He didn't move away. If anything, he pressed closer, his body almost flush against hers. Why keep pretending you don't want this as much as I do? Because I have self-respect, she answered, trying to push away, but finding nowhere to go. Because I will not become another one of your conquests. You are not just any conquest, he said, his voice thick with sincerity. You are... What? Vera interrupted, her eyes flashing with an emotion he couldn't name. What am I, Martim? Your employee? Your subordinate? The woman you've decided you want because I'm the only one who doesn't throw herself at your feet? The raw truth in her words hit him like a punch to the gut, but the whiskey in his blood and 3 years of frustration stopped him from backing down. You are the woman I want, he said, his hand moving to her waist. The only woman I truly want. No. Vera tried to push him, but he was stronger. Don't do this. Do what? Finally admit what's between us? There is nothing between us, she hissed, her voice low enough not to attract attention. You're drunk, and you're confusing power with... She never finished the sentence. His lips found hers. The kiss was intense, desperate, charged with 3 years of pent-up tension. For a fleeting moment, Vera responded, her lips softening under his, her hands clutching the lapels of his tuxedo. But then reality struck her like a wave of ice. They were at a public event. He was drunk. She was his employee. And most importantly, he was forcing something she had not consented to. No! The cry tore from her throat with a force that stunned them both. It was loud enough to slice through every conversation in the hall, loud enough to make 300 heads snap in their direction, loud enough to echo off the marble walls like a gunshot. Martin pulled back instantly, his eyes wide with shock. Vera was trembling, one hand pressed to her lips, the other shoving him away. The silence in the hall was deafening. 300 pairs of eyes, tycoons, ambassadors, ministers, celebrities, all staring at them. Some in shock, others with morbid curiosity, many with the look of someone who had just witnessed the scandal of the year. Martim Sanches, the man who controlled billions, who had never been publicly challenged or humiliated, stood there like a scolded schoolboy, the faint smudge of his assistant's lipstick on his lips and the echo of her no ringing in his ears. Vera, he began, his voice far too loud in the crushing silence. No, she repeated, quieter this time, but with a finality that cut deeper than the shout. Simply no. She pushed herself away from the window, smoothed her dress with trembling hands, and lifted her chin with a dignity that inspired both envy and desire in half the men present. Then, with steady steps, she walked towards the exit. Martin was left alone, with 300 pairs of eyes still fixed on him. He could hear the whispers starting. He could imagine the newspaper headlines. He could picture the videos that someone had surely recorded, already being shared across social media. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the revelation that had just hit him with the force of a hurricane. For the first time in his 42 years, a woman had told him no. And not only had she said it, she had done so in the most public and humiliating way possible. And God forgive him, but instead of feeling humbled or incensed, he felt intrigued, aroused, obsessed. Vera Muniz had just done something no woman in his life had ever done. She had rejected him, utterly, publicly, leaving no room for doubt or second guessing. As he walked out of the ballroom under the weight of 300 judging eyes, Martin Sanches smiled for the first time that night. The hunt had begun, and he would be the most patient, most determined predator Vera Muniz had ever encountered. Because now he knew the truth. She wasn't just the woman he desired. She was the woman he needed to conquer. Barcelona, the Sanchez Tower Executive Office. 7 in the morning. The city was still stirring under the golden Mediterranean sun when Martin arrived on the 42nd floor of the Sanchez Tower, the skyscraper of glass and steel that dominated Barcelona's skyline, like a monument to his empire. He had slept for only 2 hours, yet his Armani suit was immaculate, his hair perfectly styled, and his expression revealed nothing but the glacial determination that had made him the most feared and respected magnate in Europe. But inside, a silent tempest was consuming every fiber of his being. No. The word still echoed in his mind, an obsessive mantra. It wasn't just what she had said, but how she had said it. The strength, the conviction, the absolute dignity as 300 people watched his public humiliation. Martin poured himself an espresso from the 15,000 euro Italian machine installed in his private office and walked to the glass wall that offered a panoramic view of the city. Down below, Barcelona pulsed with 8 million people going about their morning routines, completely oblivious to the fact that the man watching from above had just discovered something deeply unsettling about himself. He was obsessed, not merely interested, not just attracted, obsessed with an intensity that both frightened and thrilled him. The sound of the private elevator arriving at his floor made his muscles tense. 8:30. Vera always arrived at precisely 8:30. Not a minute early, not a minute late, even after last night. Her footsteps in the marble corridor were unmistakable. 7-centimeter heels, a firm and determined stride, the rhythm of a woman who never showed weakness or hesitation. Martin closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to imagine those long legs, those hips moving beneath the fabric of her eternally flawless suits. 3 knocks on the door. Always 3. Firm. Professional. Enter. Vera appeared in the doorway like an apparition from his most torturous dreams. A charcoal gray suit, perfectly tailored. Her hair was pulled back in an impeccable low bun, her discreet makeup accentuating her brown eyes without exaggeration. There was no sign of what had happened the night before, save for an almost imperceptible stiffness in her shoulders. "Good morning, Mr. Sanchez," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "I have today's schedule and the reports you requested." Mr. Sanchez. Again. As if the forced intimacy of the previous night had never happened. "Vera." He turned slowly, studying every detail of her expression. "We need to talk about last night." She placed the documents on the solid mahogany desk, keeping her distance. "There's nothing to talk about. It was a misunderstanding, fueled by alcohol. It's forgotten." "Forgotten." Martin repeated the word, tasting its bitter flavor. "Do you truly believe I can forget?" "I believe you can choose to forget," she replied, finally lifting her eyes to meet his. "As I have." But he saw the truth behind the professional mask. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched almost invisibly, the rapid pulse beating in the delicate hollow of her throat. Vera hadn't forgotten a single thing. Neither had he. "Your first appointment is at 10 with the Japanese investors," she continued, completely ignoring what he'd just said. "Then lunch with the mayor at 12:30, and at 3, the board meeting about the Ibiza project." Martin didn't hear a word. He was mesmerized by the movement of her lips, the same lips that had answered his kiss for one precious moment before the devastating rejection. "Vera," he said, his voice lower, more intimate. "Look at me." She stopped speaking, but kept her eyes fixed on the documents. "Look at me," he repeated, this time with the authority that commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals. Slowly, so slowly, she raised her head, and the moment their eyes met, Martin saw everything she was trying to hide. The desire, the confusion, the fear, and something else, something that made his own heart accelerate dangerously. Vulnerability. "I was drunk last night," he admitted, taking a step toward the desk that separated them. "But I wasn't wrong about what's between us." "There is nothing between us," she whispered, but her words lacked the conviction of the night before. "Then why are you trembling?" Her gaze flickered down to her own hands, and she saw he was right. Her fingers were shaking slightly as they held the papers. She quickly set them down and crossed her arms over her chest. "I'm trembling with anger," she lied, "for being disrespected by my boss in front of 300 people." Disrespected. Martin tasted the word, feeling a genuine pang of shame for the first time. You're right. I disrespected you, and for that, I apologize. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Vera blinked, clearly not expecting an apology. I, she began, but he cut her off. But I don't apologize for wanting you, he continued, rounding the desk slowly. I don't apologize for 3 years of wanting to know the woman behind the professional mask. And I certainly don't apologize for finally having the courage to try. Courage? Vera took a step back as he approached. You call forcing a kiss on your employee courage? No. His voice was low, dangerously seductive. I call it courage to finally admit that you are not just my employee. You are the woman who has kept me awake at night for 3 years. Vera swallowed hard, her back meeting the wall of leather-bound books that lined his office. Mr. Sanches, Martin. He was close enough now to smell her perfume, the same sophisticated floral scent that had haunted him all night. How many times must I ask? You are my boss, she whispered, as if reminding herself of a vital fact. There's a hierarchy, rules, protocol. Forget the rules for a moment, he murmured, raising a hand to touch her face. Forget the protocol. Forget everything but this. His fingers traced the line of her jaw with a reverent gentleness. What do you feel when I touch you like this? Vera's eyes fluttered closed, and for an instant, her professional mask slipped away completely. Her breath quickened, her lips parted slightly, and an almost inaudible sigh escaped her throat. I feel, she began, her voice barely a whisper. What? Martin leaned closer, his lips almost brushing her ear. Tell me. I feel like I'm making a mistake, she answered, her eyes snapping open as she pulled away from his touch. A mistake that could destroy my career. Or it could be the start of something extraordinary, he countered, though he didn't try to touch her again. For you, perhaps. Vera straightened her shoulders, the professional mask sliding back into place like armor. For me, it would just be another story about the assistant who got involved with the boss and lost everything. The raw truth in her words hit him like a physical blow. That was it. That was exactly what she feared. And, God forgive him, he had never once stopped to consider what a relationship between them would mean for her. Vera, no, she held up a hand, stopping him from moving closer. I will not be another tabloid headline. I will not be a whisper in the hallways about the Brazilian who seduced the boss. I will not sacrifice a 15-year career, built on sweat and dignity, for a few moments of pleasure. And what if it wasn't just a few moments? The question escaped him before he could stop it, heavy with a sincerity that surprised even himself. What if it was something real? Vera stared at him for a long moment, and he saw something flicker behind her eyes. Hope, perhaps, or longing. But then she shook her head. Men like you don't fall in love with women like me, she said, her voice laced with a sadness he hadn't expected. Men like you have your fun with us and then move on to the next conquest. You don't know me as well as you think. I know powerful men, she retorted. I've worked for them for years. I know how you operate. A wave of frustration washed over Martin, mixed with something deeper, a desperate need to prove her wrong. Then let me prove you're wrong. How? The simple question caught him off guard. How, exactly, would he prove his intentions were different? How could he convince a smart, experienced woman that he wasn't just another predatory boss pursuing his subordinate? The answer came to him like a revelation. He would court her, properly, patiently, the way she deserved. Have dinner with me, he said. No, not as a boss and an employee, he pressed on, ignoring her immediate rejection. As a man who admires a woman and would like to get to know her better. The answer is still no. Why? Because I know how these things end, she answered. But he heard the hesitation in her voice. And what if I promise it will end exactly the way you want it to? Vera laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. No man can promise that. Then let me be the first. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and unspoken possibilities. Martin could see the internal battle reflected on Vera's face. Desire warring with prudence, attraction fighting with fear. I have to work, she said finally, breaking eye contact. Is that it? You're just going to pretend this conversation never happened? That is exactly what I'm going to do, she confirmed, walking toward the door. Because it's the smart thing to do. Vera. His voice stopped her, her hand on the doorknob. You can pretend you feel nothing. You can keep up your professional barriers. You can treat me as just your boss, but you cannot stop me from feeling what I feel for you. Vera didn't turn, but he saw her shoulders tense. And what is it that you feel, Mr. Sanchez? The deliberate formality should have angered him. Instead, it only hardened his resolve. Obsession, he admitted, the raw honesty of the word echoing in the quiet office. An obsession with a woman who is strong enough to tell me no, smart enough to challenge me, and beautiful enough to steal my sleep every night. Vera remained motionless for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was so low, he almost missed it. Obsession isn't love, Mr. Sanchez. It's merely the wounded ego of a man accustomed to getting everything he wants. Then she opened the door and was gone, leaving him alone with the echo of her words and the lingering fragrance of her perfume. Martin stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. She was wrong. She had to be. What he felt wasn't just a bruised ego or the desire to conquer the unattainable. It was something deeper, more dangerous, and he would prove it to her, even if it took the rest of his life. Walking to his desk, he opened his laptop and began typing an email. Not to Vera. She clearly wasn't ready for direct communication, but to the most exclusive florist in Barcelona. If she wanted to be courted properly, then he would court her as no woman had ever been courted before. And when he was finished, she would know exactly what it meant to be wanted by Martin Sanches. The first move in the most important game of his life had just been made. 2 weeks later, Santorini, Greece, Villa Poseidon, 6 in the evening. The flowers arrived every morning at 8 o'clock sharp. Rare orchids on Monday, white Ecuadorian roses on Tuesday, Japanese peonies on Wednesday, French white lilies on Thursday. And on Friday, a mixed arrangement so breathtaking that the entire reception of the Sanchez Tower would stop to admire it. Vera tried to ignore them. She tried to treat them as just another aspect of the job, instructing the receptionist to distribute them around the floors or donate them to the nearby children's hospital. But it was impossible not to notice the perfection of each petal, the fragrance that filled her office for hours, or the small, elegant card that accompanied each delivery. To the most extraordinary woman I have ever met, M. Your strength inspires me. M. You deserve all the beauty in the world. M. Never signed in full, never invasive or improper. Just small reminders that Martin Sanchez had not forgotten, and he had not given up. Neither were the discreet gifts that appeared on her desk. A book of Neruda's poetry. In Spanish, she had once mentioned years ago that she admired the poet. A vintage Mont Blanc pen. She always used simple pens, but he'd noticed how she appreciated elegant calligraphy. A cashmere scarf, the exact color of her eyes. He'd observed that she was always cold in the office air conditioning. And now, this. Vera gazed out the window of the most luxurious villa in Santorini, where the turquoise waters of the Aegean Sea stretched to infinity beneath a sunset that painted the sky in shades of gold and coral. The Mediterranean breeze carried the scent of jasmine and sea salt, drifting over an island where white houses shimmered like pearls set in volcanic rock. An urgent business trip, he had said. The Greek investor can only meet us in Santorini. It's crucial for the resort project. She should have suspected. She should have realized that no truly important business meeting would ever happen in a private villa with a view of the most romantic sunset in Europe. But the proposal was legitimate. The documents were all in order. The contracts were real. And the luxury resort project in the Greek Isles was, in fact, a company priority. There was just one small detail Martin had omitted. The investor had canceled at the last minute. Miss Muniz, the Greek housekeeper's voice brought her back to the present. Mr. Sanchez requests your presence on the terrace in 10 minutes. Vera sighed, checking her reflection in the Venetian mirror of her suite. Even on a Greek island, even in a situation that had clearly been orchestrated, she maintained her professional standard. A white silk blouse, a gray pencil skirt, her hair in a low chignon, like armor against the confusing feelings Martin stirred in her. Because God forgive her, the 2 weeks of subtle courtship were working. It wasn't just the flowers or the gifts. It was the change in him, the patience, the respect, the way he had completely stopped trying to force intimate moments, opting instead for a sophisticated seduction that was slowly driving her mad. Martin was on the terrace when she arrived, leaning against the white marble balustrade with a glass of wine in his hand. He wore a white linen shirt that the wind molded against his defined torso. The setting sun cast golden highlights in his hair and sharpened the strong line of his jaw. He was, quite simply, breathtaking. Vera, he said, turning as he heard her approach, you look beautiful. Where is Mr. Demetriou? She asked, ignoring the compliment, keeping her focus on their professional reason for being there. Martin took a sip of wine, his green eyes never leaving her face. Demetriou had to cancel. An urgent family matter. I see. Vera crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive posture he had learned to recognize. When is the next flight to Barcelona? Tomorrow afternoon. There are flights tonight. There's no rush, he said, placing his glass on a wrought iron table. We're already here. Why not enjoy it? Because I'm not here to enjoy myself, she retorted. I'm here to work. And what if I said we could mix work with pleasure? I'd say that's a bad idea. Martin smiled, a slow, seductive smile that made Vera's heart quicken against her will. You've always been so cautious. Caution has gotten me this far. And where exactly is this far? He took a step toward her, but stopped at a respectful distance. A brilliant, successful woman, admired by everyone who knows her, but alone. I'm not alone, she lied. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel anything other than professional responsibility? The question struck deeper than she wanted to admit. When was the last time? When had she last let her guard down, allowed herself to be vulnerable, felt the kind of overwhelming desire that Martin ignited in her? That's none of your business, she whispered. You're right, he agreed, surprising her. It's not my business. Just as it's not your business that I can't sleep for thinking of you, that I wake up every morning imagining what it would be like to start the day by your side, that I spend all day looking for excuses to call you into my office just so I can see you for a few minutes. Vera felt her breath catch. Martin, you said my name, he observed, his voice growing huskier. You finally said my name. She realized it was true. For the first time in 2 weeks, the formality had slipped. It was a slip of the tongue, she murmured. It was honesty, he countered. Just as the way you're looking at me right now is honest. How am I looking at you? The words came out more intimately than she intended. Like you want to kiss me as much as I want to kiss you. The air between them crackled with electricity. Vera could feel the magnetic force emanating from him, the same force that had drawn her in since her first day of work 3 years ago. But this time, his approach was different. There was no rush, no pressure, just a restrained intensity that was slowly undoing her. We shouldn't, she whispered, even as she took an unconscious step toward him. Why not? Because, she began, but the reasons that had always seemed so clear now felt hazy. Because it will complicate everything. Some complications are worth it, he said, raising a hand to touch her face. And you, Vera Muniz, are worth any complication. This time, when he touched her, she didn't pull away. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she allowed herself to feel the gentle caress of his fingers against her skin. You don't know me, she whispered. Not really. Then let me. His other hand found her waist, pulling her softly closer. Let me discover who Vera Muniz is when she's not being my perfect assistant. What if you don't like what you find? Impossible. The conviction in his voice nearly broke her. Vera opened her eyes and found him gazing at her with an intensity that made her legs tremble. Martin, she started, but she didn't know how to finish the sentence. Tell me to stop, he murmured, leaning his face toward hers. If you don't want this, tell me to stop, and I will. But she said nothing. She couldn't, because the truth was, she did want this. She wanted him. She had spent 3 years denying it, 3 years fighting the strongest attraction she had ever felt in her life. When his lips finally met hers, it was nothing like the forced kiss in Monaco. This was soft, questioning, respectful, a request rather than a demand. And she answered. Her arms rose to circle his neck, her fingers tangling in his silky hair, and she let herself melt against the solid body she had fantasized about in secret for so long. The kiss deepened slowly, a mutual exploration charged with 3 years of repressed tension. Martin held her as if she were something precious and fragile, his hands roaming her back with a reverence that made tears well in her eyes. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Vera, he whispered against her lips, his forehead resting on hers. I know, she whispered back. I know. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other as the sun set over the Aegean Sea. painting the sky in shades of pink and lilac. "Have dinner with me?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Not as a boss and an employee, as a man and a woman who have just discovered something extraordinary." Vera knew she should say no, knew that every moment she spent in his arms would lead her deeper into dangerous territory. But when she looked into his green eyes, she saw something that made her hesitate. Vulnerability. Real, raw, honest vulnerability. Martin Sanches, the man who commanded empires and never showed weakness, was laying himself bare for her. And that changed everything. "Just dinner," she said finally. "Just dinner," he agreed, but the smile on his lips promised so much more. The table had been set in the villa's garden, lit by hundreds of floating candles in glass bowls and surrounded by blooming bougainvillea. The aroma of grilled lamb and Mediterranean spices mingled with the perfume of the flowers and the salt from the sea. It was the most romantic setting Vera had ever seen. "You planned all of this," she said, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "I was hoping you'd finally say yes," he admitted. "And when you did, I wanted it to be perfect. And if I'd insisted on going back to Barcelona tonight, then I would have canceled everything and gone with you." He sat in the chair opposite her, but leaned forward, closing the distance between them. "Because wherever you are is where I want to be." It was a dangerous declaration, laden with promises Vera wasn't sure he could keep. But that night, under the Greek stars and the hypnotic spell of his eyes, she chose to believe. "Tell me something about yourself that no one else knows," she said, taking a sip of wine. Martin smiled, straight to the point. "You said you wanted to get to know me. It works both ways." He was silent for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. "I'm afraid of being alone," he said finally. "I wake up every morning in a king-size bed in a 5,000 square foot apartment, and for a few seconds, before I remember who I am and what I have to do, I feel an emptiness so profound, it terrifies me." The raw honesty of his confession caught her off guard. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because with you, for the first time in years, that emptiness completely disappears." Vera felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous and overwhelming she had spent years avoiding. "Your turn," he said. "Tell me something no one else knows." She hesitated, but the vulnerability he had shown deserved to be reciprocated. "I'm afraid of not being enough," she admitted. "That no matter how hard I work or how much I achieve, in people's minds, I'll always be just the Brazilian assistant." "To me," Martin said, his voice thick with sincerity, "you are the most impressive woman I have ever met, and that has nothing to do with your job." The tears Vera had been holding back finally threatened to spill over. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever looked past her professional competence to see the insecure woman beneath. "Don't cry," he said softly, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "You are extraordinary, Vera, and it's time you started to believe it." Dinner continued for hours, the conversation flowing between them as it never had before. They talked about dreams and fears, ambitions and disappointments. Martin told her about the pressure of carrying the family legacy, about the lonely nights at the top of the corporate world. Vera spoke of leaving Brazil at 23, of building a career in a foreign country, of the constant struggle to prove her worth. And with every word exchanged, every smile shared, every moment of genuine connection, Vera's defenses crumbled, piece by piece. When they finally rose from the table, it was nearly midnight. "Thank you," she said, as he walked her to the door of her suite. "For what?" "For seeing me. Really seeing me." Martin stopped at her door, his eyes searching for hers in the soft hallway light. "Vera," he said, his voice filled with an emotion she had never heard before. "Can I say something?" She nodded. "I'm falling in love with you. And it's not obsession, or a bruised ego, or the thrill of the chase. It's you, the strong woman who challenges me, the kind person who cares about everyone around her, the intelligent woman who makes me want to be a better version of myself." Vera felt the world stand still. "Martin, you don't have to say anything right now," he interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know." He leaned in and kissed her forehead, a tender, respectful gesture that nearly undid her completely. "Good night, Vera. Good night," she whispered. But as he started to walk away, something inside her broke. 3 years of resistance, 3 years of denial, 3 years of fighting what her heart knew to be true. "Martin," her voice stopped him. He turned. "Stay," she whispered, hardly believing the words leaving her own mouth. "Please, stay with me." His eyes widened with surprise and hope. "Vera, are you sure?" She nodded, reaching her hand out to him. "I'm scared of what this means. I'm scared of the consequences. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering, what if?" Martin took her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. "Then let's not wonder what if," he said, following her into the suite. "Let's find out what is." And as the door closed behind them, Vera finally stopped fighting the inevitable. She was falling in love with Martin Sanches, and for the first time in 3 years, it didn't scare her. It set her free. 1 month later, Paris, France, Hotel Plaza Athénée, 11 p.m. The rain pattered softly against the windows of the imperial suite as Vera watched the lights of the Eiffel Tower sparkle in the distance, its golden reflection dancing on the dark waters of the Seine. She was wearing only one of Martin's white silk shirts, which fell to mid-thigh, her hair loose and cascading over her shoulders in natural waves that he loved to run his fingers through. The last 4 weeks had been a waking dream. After Santorini, they had maintained absolute discretion at the office. He remained the imposing CEO, and she the flawless assistant. But now, there were looks charged with promises, secret smiles shared across boardrooms, and the delicious tension of knowing that the moment they left that professional environment, they belonged completely to each other. Martin had been incredibly careful to protect her from any suspicion or gossip. There were discreet nights at exclusive restaurants far from the business circuit, weekends at his private estate on the Costa Brava, intimate evenings in his private apartment, whose existence few even knew about. And Paris? Paris had been the cherry on top. Officially, they were here for the International Real Estate Investment Conference. Martin had reserved the most romantic suite in the most elegant hotel in the city, all to show Vera what it meant to be courted by a truly passionate man. "What are you thinking about?" His deep voice reached her from the living room, where he was finishing a call with Asian investors. "About how my life has completely changed in 30 days, she answered, not turning from the window. She heard him approach, felt the warmth of his body as he wrapped her from behind, his arms crossing over her stomach, pulling her against his bare chest. "For the better, I hope," he murmured against her ear, placing a soft kiss on her neck. Frighteningly better, she admitted, leaning her head back against his shoulder. I often wake up thinking I'm going to discover it was all a dream. Then let me prove it's real, he said, turning her in his arms until she was facing him. Even after a month together, the sight of Martin still left her breathless. His hair, tousled by her fingers, his green eyes, darkened with desire, the defined lines of his torso, a landscape she had memorized with her hands and lips. And how do you plan to do that? She asked, raising her hands to trace the muscles of his chest. In response, he lifted her effortlessly and carried her to the king-size bed, which was covered in white rose petals, a romantic surprise he had arranged while she was in the shower. I plan to spend the entire night reminding you just how real this is, he murmured, laying her gently upon the silk sheets. What followed was a symphony of intimate whispers, reverent caresses, and the deepest connection Vera had ever experienced. Martin made love to her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, alternating between overwhelming passion and a tenderness that brought tears of emotion to her eyes. When they finally lay still, tangled in the rumpled sheets and surrounded by the soft scent of roses, Vera realized there was something different about this night, an emotional intensity that went beyond the physical. Martin, she whispered, tracing lazy circles on his chest. What's going to happen to us when we go back to Barcelona? She felt his muscles tense slightly beneath her touch. What do you want to happen? I don't know, she admitted. This bubble we've created is perfect, but we can't live on eternal trips and secret encounters, can we? Martin was silent for a long moment, his fingers toying with a loose strand of her hair. Vera, he said finally, his voice laced with a seriousness she rarely heard. I need to tell you something. Something in his tone made her push up on one elbow to look at him directly. What is it? 2 weeks ago, I received an offer, a very tempting offer. Vera's heart began to race. What kind of offer? Hamilton and Associates in New York. They want me to take over their international division. It would be a significant promotion, a new challenge. He paused, his eyes searching hers. And a chance to start over, somewhere no one knows us as boss and employee. Vera felt the world spin. New York? I would only accept if you came with me, he said quickly. Not as my assistant. As as the woman I love. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and terrifying possibility. You love me? She whispered. Desperately, he confessed, turning on his side to face her fully. I am completely, irrevocably, hopelessly in love with you, Vera Muniz. And I know it's soon. I know it's frightening, but I can't imagine my life without you. Vera felt tears burn her eyes. Martin. I know it's a lot to process, he continued, his voice becoming slightly desperate. I know I'm asking you to leave everything you've built here. But Vera, in New York, it could just be us. No hierarchies, no judgments, no. She silenced him by placing a finger on his lips. Do you really love me? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. More than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. Even knowing that I'm stubborn, a control freak, and that I have nightmares about spreadsheets. Despite the tension of the moment, Martin smiled, especially because of that. And even knowing I take 45 minutes to get ready in the morning, and that I talk to myself when I'm concentrating. Vera, he said, his voice growing serious again, I love you for who you are, not in spite of who you are. I love your obsessive dedication to your work because it shows your passion. I love how you worry about every detail because it proves how much you care. I love that you talk to yourself because it means your brilliant mind is always working. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over, rolling silently down her cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. I tried not to. I fought against it with everything I had, but it's useless trying not to love you, Martin Sanchez. The smile that lit up his face was like the sunrise, slow, radiant, and absolutely breathtaking. Then come with me to New York, he urged, pulling her closer. Let's start our own story, away from everything and everyone. And what if it doesn't work out? The question was loaded with all the fears she still carried. But what if it does? He countered. What if we discover we're even better together than we imagined? What if New York is just the first of many chapters in our story? Vera studied him in the silence of the Parisian suite, seeing in his green eyes all the sincerity, all the love, all the hope he was offering. And for the first time in her life, she decided to be brave enough to accept the happiness being handed to her. When would we leave? She asked. His smile widened. Is that a yes? That's a convince me I'm not going completely insane. Martin laughed, a rich, happy sound that filled the room with joy. In 3 months, enough time to organize everything, for you to say a proper goodbye to Barcelona, and for us to plan our future. Our future, she repeated, tasting the words. I like the sound of that. So do I. They lay in silence for a few minutes, absorbing the magnitude of the decision they had just made. Vera felt a mixture of terror and euphoria coursing through her veins, the sensation of leaping from a cliff without knowing if there was a safety net below. Martin, she said eventually, there's something you need to know about me. He propped himself up on his elbow, a worried expression crossing his face. What? I am the most fearful person in the world when it comes to relationships, she confessed. I will question everything. I will have moments of panic. I will try to run away at least 5 times before we even get to New York. And you have to promise me you won't give up on me. That when I freak out, and I will freak out, you'll remind me why we decided to do this. Martin leaned in to kiss her forehead, a tender gesture that had already become familiar between them. Vera Muniz, he said, his voice imbued with an almost reverent solemnity. I promise that when you freak out, I will hold your hand. When you question everything, I will give you the answers. And when you try to run, I will show you every reason why it's worth staying. Even if I'm really difficult? Especially if you're difficult, he smiled. Easy things have never interested me. Vera laughed through her tears. You're impossible. And you're perfect, he countered, pulling her into another kiss. This time, when they made love, it was different. There was a new urgency, an emotional depth that transcended the physical. It was the consummation not just of their bodies, but of a mutual promise for a future. When they finally fell asleep, entwined like 2 halves of a whole, Vera dreamt for the first time in years of possibilities instead of limitations. And 3 floors below, at the hotel concierge, a discreet man worked through the night, arranging the details of a surprise Martin had planned for the next day. A surprise that would change everything between them forever. Because Martin Sanchez wasn't just a man in love. He was a man in love who had finally found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with, and he was ready to prove it in the most permanent way possible. 3 months later, Bali, Indonesia, Villa Samadana, 6 in the morning. The gentle sound of the Indian Ocean's waves mingled with the morning song of tropical birds as Vera slowly awoke in the hand-carved teak Balinese bed, cocooned by white linen curtains that danced softly in a breeze scented with frangipani and jasmine. The golden light of dawn filtered through the villa's open windows, creating hypnotic patterns on the volcanic stone walls. 3 months. 3 months since Paris, since the declarations of love, since the decision to start over together in New York. And now, here they were, on the most idyllic island in the world, supposedly for one last vacation before the big move. Vera smiled, reaching for the side of the bed where Martin should have been, but found only warm sheets and a small, handmade paper envelope with her name written in the elegant script she had grown to love. My love. Put on the white dress in the closet and meet me in the garden at 7 o'clock. Trust me. M. A white dress. Vera's heart began to pound with a suspicion she didn't dare let blossom into hope. Walking to the carved wooden wardrobe, she found the most stunning dress she had ever seen. Pure silk in a shade of pearlescent white. An empire waistcut that flowed like water over her body, discreetly embroidered with golden threads that caught the light like starlight. It was a wedding dress, but it couldn't be what she was thinking. It was too crazy, too soon, too impossible. With slightly trembling hands, she dressed, leaving her hair down in the natural waves Martin loved, applying just a touch of gloss to her lips. In the antique bronze mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her, radiant, in love, transformed. The villa's garden had been completely transformed overnight. A path of white and pink frangipani petals led to a makeshift altar under a bamboo pergola, woven with wild orchids and tropical foliage. Floating candles and glass bowls cast a magical glow, while the breathtaking view of the ocean served as a backdrop more perfect than any cathedral could offer. And there, waiting for her at the end of the path, was Martin. He was wearing a white linen suit that highlighted his Mediterranean tan, his hair combed back, and in his green eyes was a mixture of nervousness and determination that made Vera's heart stop completely. Beside him, a Balinese celebrant in traditional attire smiled gently, holding an ancient ceremonial book. "Oh my God," Vera whispered, her hands flying to cover her mouth. Martin took a few steps toward her, extending his hand with a smile that was both vulnerable and hopeful. "Before you say anything," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I know this is crazy. I know it's rushed. I know I should have asked you first, planned it with you, followed all the conventions." "Martin," she breathed, but he continued, "but I also know that I've already wasted too much of my life without you. I know I want to wake up next to you every day for the next 50 years. I know I want to face New York, face everything, as your husband." He knelt right there, in the middle of the petal-strewn path, pulling a velvet box from his pocket that made Vera hold her breath. "Vera Muniz," he said, opening the box to reveal the most exquisite ring she had ever seen. A vintage-cut solitaire diamond, set in platinum, surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the morning light like tears of joy. "Will you marry me? Here, in this paradise, with only the ocean and the Balinese gods as our witnesses. The silence stretched for an eternity. Vera looked at the man kneeling before her, the same man who had publicly humiliated her in Monaco, who had courted her with tireless patience, who had declared himself so vulnerably in Paris, and who was now offering her not just his heart, but his entire future. "You are completely insane," she said finally. Martin's face paled slightly. "Is that a no?" "That is a, you should have warned me so I could get my nails done." She laughed through the tears that had begun to stream down her face. "Of course it's a yes, you incorrigible, romantic fool." The smile that lit up Martin's face could have rivaled the rising sun. He stood quickly, sliding the perfect ring onto her finger as he pulled her into a kiss that would have made the ocean itself sigh with envy. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you so much it hurts." "I love you too," she whispered back, "more than I ever thought possible." The ceremony that followed was intimate and deeply emotional. The Balinese celebrant conducted the island's traditional rituals, the exchange of frangipani leis, the burning of incense to bless their union, the promises whispered in 3 different languages under the golden light of dawn. When Martin spoke his vows, his voice thick with raw emotion, Vera knew she had found not just the love of her life, but her soulmate. "Vera," he said, holding her hands as the ocean whispered its approval, "I promise to be the man you deserve every day for the next 50 years. I promise to protect you, to challenge you, to support you, and to love you unconditionally. I promise that when you freak out, and we both know you will, I'll be there to remind you that we are stronger together than we ever were apart." When it was her turn, Vera felt as if she were speaking not just to Martim, but to the entire universe. "Martim," she said, her voice firm despite her tears, "you taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something is more important than fear. I promise to be brave enough to love you completely, to build an extraordinary life by your side, and to never, ever run away from the happiness we deserve together." When the officiant declared them husband and wife, and Martin kissed her, as if it were the first and last time, Vera felt something click into place inside her, like a missing piece finally finding its home. "Mrs. Sanchez," Martin murmured against her lips, testing the sound of her new name. That's going to take some getting used to," she smiled, "but I think I like it." Their celebratory breakfast was served on a veranda overlooking the ocean. A spread of tropical fruits, Balinese pastries, aromatic coffee, and French champagne lay before them. They talked about New York, about their plans for the future, about how they would explain to the world that they had married in a surprise ceremony in Bali. "I don't care what people will say," Vera said, raising her champagne flute. "For the first time in my life, I don't care about anyone's opinion but my own." "And what is your opinion, Mrs. Sanchez?" Martim asked, pulling his chair closer to hers. "My opinion is that I'm the luckiest woman in the world," she replied, leaning in to kiss him. "And that you, my impossible, romantic husband, have made me believe in fairy tales." "Our fairy tale is just beginning," he murmured. And it was. In the weeks that followed, they returned to Barcelona just long enough to arrange their move to New York. The reaction at Sanchez Tower was a mixture of shock, envy, and admiration. While some had suspected something was brewing, no one had expected such a romantic and sudden wedding. The business press had a field day with the story. Europe's most eligible bachelor CEO, weds in secret ceremony, the romance that began with a public no, from assistant to wife, a modern love story. But for Martim and Vera, the headlines were irrelevant. What mattered was the spectacular apartment he had bought for them, overlooking Central Park, the international law firm where she had secured a position as a senior legal consultant, and the nights they spent exploring their new city as passionate newlyweds. 6 months after their wedding in Bali, as they walked hand in hand through Times Square after a Broadway musical, Vera turned to Martim with a smile that rivaled the neon lights surrounding them. "Do you remember," she said, "that no I shouted in Monaco?" "How could I forget?" he laughed. "It was the moment that changed my life." "Mine too," she admitted, "because that's when I discovered that sometimes you have to say no to all the wrong things before you can say yes to the right one." "And am I the right one?" he asked, pulling her closer as people rushed past them. "You are the most right thing that has ever happened to me," she answered, rising on her toes to kiss him right there, in the middle of the world's busiest crossroads. As they kissed beneath the lights of New York, surrounded by the chaos and energy of the city that never sleeps, they both knew with absolute certainty that they had found not just love, but home. Because sometimes the most important no of your life is the one that leads you directly to the yes that will change everything forever. And the shout that had echoed in Monaco that night had transformed into the sweetest whisper ever heard under the stars of Bali. "I do."